I gave up everything: my career, my apartment overlooking Chicago's skyline, my six-figure salary to save my father's dying company. For 7 years, I rebuilt his crumbling empire brick by brick, turning his debts into millions and his name into a legend. Then, one night, beneath the glow of champagne and applause, I watched him hand everything I built to my younger brother, the golden child who had done nothing but show up. The crowd cheered, cameras flashed. My father smiled proudly, calling him the future of the Cole legacy. And me? I stood in the shadows, invisible, the daughter who gave him everything and suddenly meant nothing. They laughed when I walked away, thinking I had lost. But what they didn't know was that I had already begun building something of my own, and this time, I wasn't saving anyone. When my father called that night, I almost didn't answer. I was still at my office in Chicago, the skyline glowing like a sea of gold beneath the rain. My promotion letter lay open on my desk: 6 figures, a corner office, the dream I'd fought for since college. But when I heard his voice, all of that faded. "Emma," he said, his tone breaking, "I think I'm done. The company's collapsing. I can't hold it together anymore." For a moment, I just listened to the silence behind his words, the sound of a man who had always been my rock finally cracking. "Dad?" I whispered. "How bad is it?" "Bad enough that the bank's calling every hour. Payroll's overdue. Suppliers are threatening to sue. Maybe it's time I let go." Let go. That wasn't my father. Richard Cole had built Cole Construction from nothing: one man, one truck, and an impossible dream. I remembered him coming home covered in dust, smelling of sawdust and sweat, telling me, "If you work hard enough, nothing can take it from you." Now he was talking like a man who'd already lost. I looked around my office: the glass walls, the awards, the congratulatory emails, everything I had built for me. And yet, it felt hollow. "Dad," I said softly, "I'm coming home." "Emma, no. You've worked too hard. You're my family. You don't give up on family." He tried to stop me, but I'd already decided. That night, I packed 3 suitcases, left my apartment keys on the counter, and drove 6 hours through the storm to Springfield. The highway lights blurred as rain lashed across the windshield. I kept thinking about all the times he'd stood by me, all the nights he stayed up fixing school projects when I was a kid. When I finally arrived, the sight broke my heart. The once busy Cole construction yard was silent. Trucks sat rusted under flickering lights. The office windows were dark, the name Cole Construction half faded on the wall. Dad was inside, hunched over a desk buried in unpaid bills. "You shouldn't have come," he muttered without looking up. "Then who will?" I asked. He glanced up, eyes tired. "You don't belong in this mess, Emma. This is a man's business." That stung more than I expected. I crossed my arms. "Then maybe it's time a woman saves it." He didn't answer, just stared the way fathers do when they don't know whether to be proud or terrified. I stood there, surrounded by silence and failure, and made a promise I didn't dare say out loud. "I will save this company. I will save you." I didn't know it yet, but that promise would cost me everything: my career, my peace, and the family I was trying so hard to protect. The first morning back in Springfield, I woke up before sunrise. The house smelled of dust and coffee, the same smell I'd grown up with. For a moment, it felt like being a kid again, before the world got complicated. Then I saw the stack of unpaid bills on the kitchen counter, and the illusion shattered. Dad was already in the yard, barking orders at a group of workers. Half of them looked bored, the other half looked ready to quit. Equipment sat rusting in the rain. I could almost feel the weight of the debt pressing down on us. "You really came back," Dad said when he saw me. "I said I would. You won't last a week." I smiled faintly. "Watch me." I started by digging into the company's financials. The books were a disaster. Invoices missing, taxes overdue, contracts unsigned. My head spun as I flipped through page after page of chaos. That night, I stayed in the office until 2 a.m., highlighting numbers, drawing up spreadsheets, and making calls to my old contacts in Chicago. By dawn, I had a plan. When Dad walked in, I handed him a folder. "If we renegotiate these contracts, cut unnecessary expenses, and refinance the trucks, we can survive the quarter," I said. He stared at the papers like I was speaking another language. You think you can fix this overnight? No. But I can stop the bleeding. He grunted and walked away. That was the closest thing to approval I was going to get. The following weeks were brutal. I met with angry suppliers, soothed nervous investors, and convinced banks to give us one more chance. Most of the men I spoke to looked at me with skepticism. Does your father know you're handling this? One banker asked. Yes, I replied. And he's lucky I am. Behind their polite smiles, I could see the disbelief. A young woman, fixing a failing construction empire? They thought I was naive. But numbers didn't lie. Within 3 months, our cash flow turned positive. Projects restarted. Clients who'd left us began calling again. The name Cole Construction started to mean something again. One night, Dad walked into my office holding a newspaper. The headline read, "Local company stages unbelievable comeback." He didn't say thank you. He just stood there and muttered, "Maybe you're not completely hopeless." It was his version of love. I smiled. "Glad I could live up to your low expectations." He almost smiled back almost. Still, I told myself it was enough. Because somewhere, deep down, I still believed that once I proved myself, once he saw what I'd done, he'd finally look at me and see not just a daughter, but an equal. I was wrong. Success didn't come suddenly. It crept in quietly like sunrise after years of darkness. Within 2 years, Cole Construction was no longer a sinking ship. We were signing million-dollar contracts with the city. Our name was on billboards, our trucks rolling through every major project in the state. And people started talking. Richard Cole, the genius who rebuilt Springfield's economy, the papers said. Richard Cole, the visionary. And for every article had his face. Not one mentioned mine. At first, I didn't care. I told myself, this is his redemption. Let him have it. But slowly, the pride I once felt began to rot into something heavier resentment. At board meetings, men in suits congratulated Dad while I presented the numbers. "Excellent work, Mr. Cole," they'd say, shaking his hand. "You have a brilliant team," he'd reply, smiling as if I wasn't even there. Sometimes I'd catch him glancing at me, eyes cold, calculating, as if I was part of the machinery, not his daughter. Then came the gala. The city hosted a business awards ceremony. I'd worked for weeks to prepare our presentation graphs, photos, results, all the data proving how far we'd come. That night, I wore a black dress, simple but elegant, and stood beside Dad on stage. The host's voice echoed, "Springfield's Entrepreneur of the Year, Richard Cole." The crowd erupted in applause. Flashbulbs burst. I smiled, clapping with everyone else, waiting for him to acknowledge the person who had rebuilt the empire he'd nearly destroyed. He didn't. "I couldn't have done this without my incredible team," he said. "And my family, especially my son Ethan, who I know will continue our legacy." My stomach twisted. Ethan? My brother hadn't been in the picture for years. The last I'd heard, he was backpacking through Europe, burning through Dad's money. I froze, forcing myself to keep clapping. But inside, everything cracked. After the ceremony, I found him outside the hotel, smoking his usual cigar. "Ethan?" I asked. "You're back?" He grinned. "Dad called me last month, said the company's doing great. Figured it was time to come home." "Of course he did," I muttered. When Dad joined us, his hand rested proudly on Ethan's shoulder. "Your brother's got a good head for business," he said. "He's going to learn from the ground up." I stared at them, both the father I'd saved and the son who'd done nothing. "You really think he's ready?" I asked quietly. "He's family," Dad said simply. I wanted to laugh, but it came out as a sigh. That night, when I got home, I looked at myself in the mirror. The woman staring back wasn't proud, she was tired. I'd built an empire for my father. But as I stood there in the quiet glow of my apartment, I realized I was building it for the wrong person. It happened on a Monday morning, quiet, ordinary, and cruel. Dad called me into his office. The blinds were drawn, the air thick with the smell of old coffee and expensive regret. Ethan sat across the desk, wearing a tailored navy suit, that same smug smile he'd inherited from Dad. "Emma?" Dad began. "We need to talk about the company's future." Something in his tone made my stomach twist. He continued, avoiding my eyes. You've done great work, but it's time for new leadership. The company's grown, and we need the fresh energy. I stared at him. Fresh energy? What does that mean? Ethan leaned back, crossing his arms. It means I'm stepping in as vice president, he said casually. You'll still be here just focusing on operations. Operations. That was my demotion, wrapped in a polite word. You're replacing me? I whispered. Not replacing, Dad said. Realigning. You've carried us far, but Ethan has vision. He's the future of the coal name. I laughed a dry, hollow sound. Vision? He's never run a project. He doesn't even know how to read a profit report. Ethan smirked. Then you'll teach me, won't you, sis? I looked at Dad, hoping to find something: guilt, hesitation, love, but his face was made of stone. This isn't personal, Emma, he said. It's always personal, I replied. He stood up, signaling the conversation was over. You'll report to Ethan starting next week. I wanted to shout, to throw something, to make him see what he was doing, but all I managed was a single breath, shaky, restrained, furious. Congratulations, I said to Ethan. Don't destroy what I built, he grinned. Relax, big sister. I'll make it better. I walked out of that office feeling weightless, like I'd left a piece of myself behind the part that still believed loyalty meant something. That night, I found Dad in the workshop, fixing an old clock. He didn't look up when I entered. You always said we were a team, I said quietly. We are, he replied. But teams change. No, Dad, you changed. He didn't respond. The ticking clock was the only sound between us. When I turned to leave, he finally spoke. You'll thank me someday. This company needs a man at the helm. That was the moment something inside me broke, not because he'd chosen Ethan, but because he believed I wasn't enough. I walked out without another word, the sound of that ticking clock echoing in my ears, counting down to the day they'd regret everything. After that meeting, something inside me went quiet. No yelling, no tears, just silence. The kind that comes right before a storm. Everyone at the office started treating Ethan like royalty. He strutted around giving half-baked ideas, changing policies, firing people who'd been loyal for years, and Dad let him. I played along, smiled in meetings, nodded through his nonsense, and watched him slowly pull the company apart thread by thread. But while they were busy celebrating their new leadership, I was building something else, something they couldn't touch. Every night, after everyone left, I stayed behind. I went through contracts, patents, emails, years of my work. The systems I'd designed, the formulas that stabilized our cost structure, the predictive models that saved millions, all of it was mine. And they didn't even know it. When I first rebuilt coal construction, I'd registered the company's forecasting software under my own intellectual property, a small clause, buried in legal jargon. At the time, I told myself it was for protection. Now, it was my insurance. In a rented office space downtown, I set up E-Coal Strategies, a quiet consulting firm under my full name, Emma Cole. It wasn't flashy: one desk, one laptop, and a locked cabinet filled with blueprints and data they'd underestimated. At first, I just wanted distance to prove I could exist without them. But the more I watched Ethan stumble through meetings, the more I realized something. They were going to destroy everything I'd built. And maybe they deserved to. I started reaching out to old contacts, suppliers, investors, and clients who had once trusted me, not the coal name. Emma? You left the company? One investor asked. I'm consulting independently now, I said. You'll hear from me soon. And they did. By the end of the third month, 3 small contracts had shifted to my new firm. Projects no one even noticed were gone. I didn't brag. I didn't announce anything. I just worked. Ethan's ego grew as the numbers slipped. Dad blamed market volatility. I called it karma. One night, as I locked my office, I paused by the old coal construction building across the street. Their lights were still on, but I knew what was coming. They thought they'd stripped me of everything. They didn't realize I'd already taken the foundation. Not out of greed, not even for revenge. Just so that when their empire finally fell, it would collapse under the weight of their own arrogance. It started like a whisper, a delayed payment here, a missed deadline there. Then, within weeks, the cracks became impossible to ignore. Our biggest client, Midwest Energy, pulled out of a multi-million-dollar contract, citing leadership instability. Another partner postponed a project indefinitely, requesting new assurances. Dad stormed into my office one morning, his face red. "What the hell is going on, Emma? The clients are backing out." I didn't look up from my screen. "You'll have to ask your vice president." He slammed his hand on my desk. "Don't you start with that tone. Then stop pretending you don't know who's responsible," I shot back. "Ethan's decisions are burning everything we built." His eyes narrowed. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" That accusation hit me harder than I expected. Enjoying this? Watching my life's work crumble? "I didn't want this," I said quietly. "But you did. The moment you replaced me, this outcome was inevitable." He left without another word. 2 weeks later, I got a call from one of the few employees who still trusted me. "Emma," she whispered, "you should know Ethan just signed an investment deal with a Chicago firm. It doesn't look legit." My stomach dropped. I knew the name. Wells and Turner Capital, a firm I had rejected years ago for shady financial practices. That night, I couldn't sleep. I paced my apartment, replaying every conversation, every warning I'd given them. They hadn't just ignored me, they'd invited disaster to dinner. By the end of the quarter, the truth exploded. The investment firm defaulted, taking millions of Cole Construction's funds with it. Newspapers ran headlines that made my hands shake. "Cole Construction faces fraud investigation. Sources blame reckless leadership." And suddenly, everyone who once praised Richard Cole turned their backs. The phone stopped ringing. Investors withdrew. Suppliers demanded immediate payment. And the employees, the same people who used to avoid eye contact with me, began quitting one by one. Ethan tried to salvage it. He called me one evening, his voice frantic. "Emma, you have to help us. The auditors are tearing us apart." "Help you?" I repeated. "You made sure there was no place for me to do that." "Don't do this. You'll ruin Dad." "No, Ethan. He ruined himself." He cursed under his breath and hung up. The next morning, Dad showed up at my apartment. He looked older, smaller, like life had finally caught up to him. "Emma," he said, "I made mistakes, but this company, it's our legacy. I can't lose it." I looked at him for a long time, trying to find the father who once told me I could be anything. But all I saw was a man who couldn't stand the idea of his daughter being right. "You already lost it, Dad," I said softly. "You just haven't signed the papers yet." He didn't respond, just turned and walked away, shoulders slumped. That week, Cole Construction officially halted operations. The final headline came a few days later. "Cole Construction on verge of bankruptcy. CEO silent." I stood outside the building that once defined my life. The sign Cole Construction hung crooked, one letter missing. I felt something strange. Not joy, not sorrow, just peace. I didn't destroy them. I didn't have to. They built their empire on my back, and when they kicked me off, they took away the only thing holding it up. The fall was always theirs. The storm outside was nothing compared to the one waiting in my office. It was early morning. The rain beat against the windows like fists, thunder rolling low and distant. Mia, my assistant, poked her head in. "Emma, there are 2 men here to see you," she said cautiously. "Who?" They said their names are Richard and Ethan Cole. I felt a sharp twist in my chest. It was only a matter of time. "Send them in," I said. The door opened, and for the first time in years, I saw my father and brother standing together, but not as the proud men I remembered. Dad's suit was wrinkled, his eyes sunken. Ethan looked pale, jittery, like someone who hadn't slept in days. They sat down opposite me. For a moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the ticking clock on the wall, steady, merciless. Dad finally broke the silence. "Emma," he began, voice trembling. "We need your help." I folded my hands on the desk, my expression unreadable. "With what?" "The banks froze our accounts. The lawsuits are piling up. We're about to lose everything." "You already did." Ethan leaned forward, his tone sharp. "Don't play innocent. Everyone knows you took our clients." I met his glare. "No, Ethan. I earned those clients. You just inherited what you didn't understand." Dad slammed his palm on the desk. "Enough. This is your family." "Was it?" I asked quietly. When you replaced me with him, did you still see me as family? Or just a mistake that didn't fit your idea of legacy? His face flushed. You don't understand how the world works. No, Dad. I understand it better than you ever did. For a long moment, no one said a word. The rain grew heavier, streaking the glass like tears neither of us would shed. Ethan broke the silence first. You're doing this on purpose. You want us to suffer. I don't need to want it, I said coldly. You made sure of it yourselves. Dad's voice cracked. Emma, please. You can stop this. Help us rebuild. You know the systems, the contacts. I stood, slowly, the sound of my chair scraping across the floor echoing like thunder. Do you know what I remember most, Dad? The day you told me, this company needs a man at the helm. He winced. I was wrong. Yes, I said softly. But it's too late to be right now. I walked to the window. The city stretched out before me, gray and cold yet alive, thriving. You taught me to work hard for everything I wanted. And I did. But you also taught me what happens when pride replaces love. When I turned back, both of them were silent, two broken reflections of the men they once were. Emma, Dad said, voice barely above a whisper. If you do this, there's no coming back. I already left, I said. You just didn't notice. I pressed the intercom button. Mia, please escort Mr. Cole and his son out. Ethan jumped up, furious. You'll regret this. No, I replied, calm and certain. You will. They hesitated, as if waiting for me to change my mind. I didn't. As they walked out, Dad looked back one last time, not with anger, but something worse. Regret. The door closed behind them, and I exhaled for the first time in years. For the first time, I was free not from them, but from the part of me that still needed their approval. 2 months after that confrontation, the inevitable finally happened. The morning headline read, Cole Construction declares bankruptcy. The words stared back at me from the newspaper like a final verdict. The empire my father had once called his legacy was gone. The office was emptied overnight. The machines in the yard were sold to pay off debts. Employees I'd worked beside for years packed up their desks in silence. I didn't go to the auction. I didn't need to. Some endings don't need witnesses. Ethan disappeared first, fled the country with what little cash remained in the company's account. The news broke 2 days later. Cole Air under investigation for fraud. Dad tried to deny it, but the truth came out fast. He'd signed off on every deal Ethan made. The bank seized his house, his cars, even the land our childhood home stood on. One afternoon, I got a call from an unknown number. When I answered, it was him. Emma, Dad said softly. I've lost everything. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. I could hear his breathing slow, uneven, and something in me ached. He was still my father, but the man on the phone wasn't the one who'd raised me. He was just what was left, after pride stripped everything else away. I'm sorry, he whispered. I thought I was doing what was right for the family. You were doing what was right for your ego, I replied gently. There was a silence heavy and fragile. Then he said, Ethan's gone. I don't even know where. You were always the strong one, Emma. You should have been the one in charge. It was the apology I had once dreamed of hearing. But now, it didn't heal, it only echoed. It doesn't matter anymore, Dad, I said quietly. The company's gone. The name's gone. Maybe it's better this way. He didn't respond. The line went dead. I never heard from him again. Weeks later, the building that once bore our family's name was demolished. The crash of steel and glass echoed through downtown Springfield. People stopped and watched, but I didn't. I stood across the street, hidden behind a line of trees, and whispered, goodbye. It wasn't revenge that brought me peace. It was truth. The truth that I had done everything I could and that sometimes, the only way to win is to walk away. In the months that followed, e-Cole strategies flourished. Clients I had once fought to keep under my father's name now came to me freely. I didn't boast, didn't advertise. I just worked. Quietly, honestly. One morning, as I walked into my Chicago office, Mia handed me an envelope. It came with no return address, she said. Inside was a handwritten letter. Shaky, uneven ink. My father's handwriting. Emma, I don't expect forgiveness. I just hope you're living the life you deserve. I finally understand legacy isn't about blood. It's about what we build with integrity. I failed you, but I'm proud of you. The paper trembled in my hands. For the first time in a long while, I let myself cry not out of anger, but relief. I folded the letter, placed it in my drawer, and looked out the window. Chicago's skyline shimmered under the morning sunday. Justice hadn't come from revenge. It had come from silence, from refusing to fight a war that time would win for me. I'd lost my family, yes, but I'd found something greater. Freedom.